Hello there, welcome to this first edit where we will be learning about the concept of bit depth, which has got to do with basically the depth of color. That means how well can you change color, which is a pretty important part of this course. So we are basically going to be talking about these little pixels that make these images. So here's a shot of one of my studio portrait clients, and the only editing till now I have done to this shot, this is straight out of the camera, is that I've just cropped it. But we've not really messed around with the pixels, but now we will in order to understand the concept of bit depth. So one of the things that happened when I did this shoot was that when I was editing it, one of the requests by this woman was that if I can change the color of her dress to something close to yellow or orange. And I said, yeah, that is pretty easy. But things weren't going exactly as planned. So let me show you what happened. So here, by the way, I've got this image open, which you must have got your hands on. So I hope that you're following along. Now, you don't have to do anything right now. So right now, you just watch, okay, because we're just understanding the concept. Because here, also, on this tab, I have another image, which is the same as this. There's no difference, right? Right now, doesn't look like there's any difference. You can see some changes here. Don't worry about that. We will come to that. But the image looks exactly the same. But let's go to the first image right now. So remember, the request is to turn this into something yellow or orange, which is not a tough task because I can go to one of the adjustment functions here. Very basic one, hue saturation. That is something that we'll be seeing a lot in this course, since this is the one which helps us to change the hue or the color. And we will be talking a lot into detail about this particular tool later on in this course. But for right now, very easy way of understanding this is, what is the current color of this dress? It's blue. So I'm going to be selecting blues. I could have verified by using this and actually clicking on the dress, but I know that it's blues, okay? Right now, all this is not that important. Now remember, her request is yellow or orange, okay? Later on, we'll also be seeing how this, which is called as a color wheel, works, okay? Or rather, in this case, it's not a wheel, it's a straight line, but it is actually a color wheel, which is something that we'll be learning when we learn about the concept of color theory, which is also coming in the next edit, okay? So right now, if I was to just say, okay, I'm just randomly looking for that color to turn into yellow. So here, right, we get this. Not bad, just a few seconds of edit and I'm able to get this. However, if I was to take my zoom tool and zoom, this doesn't look good, right? So this is what we call as color banding. We also call it as, artifacts. Basically, we don't have to use those technical terms. We can simply use a very simple phrase to understand, which is that it doesn't look good, right? So we want to make it look good. So obviously, I can't save this and give to my client. That'll look terrible, especially, usually we say, okay, this is going to look terrible if there was a large printout, but this would look terrible even if she was to use it as a social media image. This is pretty evident, right? But let's go to this tab right now and let's do something similar. So let's zoom in and let's exactly do the same thing. We're going to go and open up the hue saturation. Again, we're going to select blues because the dress is blue, and we're going to push this all the way. Now this time, do you see this is much better? So just compare this, even though we have got some artifacts here also, like I said, as we keep moving towards the course, you'll understand why even this is happening and how we can correct it when we understand the concept of color theory later on. But overall, this looks way better than this. Right? So there's no doubt about that. Now, the only difference between these two images was that when I open this image, I change its bit depth by going over to image, mode, and I selected 32 bits per channel. This is what we'll be understanding in this video. What exactly is this and how did it help us get a much smoother change of color? Whereas this particular image was just the default, which is for the JPEG images, which is 8 bits per channel. So we'll be understanding 8 bits, we'll be understanding 16 bits, we'll be understanding 32 bits. That how come these higher bits are better? Why, if I switch to a higher bits per channel or a higher bit depth, did this happen, right? For this, you really have to understand the concept of a bit itself and how it relates to if I was to really zoom in, even a single pixel, like what is the relationship between what is getting filled in this pixel with bit depth? That is what we'll understand in the next video. So I'll see you there. All right, welcome back. So let's try to understand how bit depth helps us in making smoother transitions when it comes to color. So like we discussed, I zoomed in like this, and we discussed that everything in Photoshop is made out of small pixels, which are basically working together and giving us this transition and change of the color, right? So you can even within this, such a small area, you can actually see the different shades. Now let's just, wherever my cursor is, okay, let's literally talk about a single pixel. So let's just talk about this pixel. Let's call it P, okay? So let's say right now this pixel wants to get colored with this. So it's, we are making all these changes and P is right now empty, doesn't have this color, and it wants to quickly get filled with this color. So what it does is it kind of looks for help. So let's see this in a diagram point of view. So this is our little pixel, which is right now empty, doesn't have any color inside it. I've just written P here, okay? So it finds these people on its way when it's looking to get filled, which are RGB, which are basically your primary colors. And P tells them, what, I've heard that you have helped out some other pixels because I've heard that you give certain shades of colors. And through those shades, when I mix them, I can form that yellow color that I want. So RGB say, yeah, of course, we can help you out. So P tells them, okay, so how does it work? So R says, you know what, all three of us have this box with us. Okay, this box is called channel. So if I go back to Photoshop, what you're going to notice here is when I showed you this thing, right, that I changed the bit depth from here, can you see that it says bits per channel? Okay, so this is going to be important right now. Don't worry too much about it. Just think of it like all these three have this box, which is called as a channel. Now, inside the channel, there are different shades of red for the red channel. In this box, there are different shades of red. So there's light red, dark red, somewhere in between and all this. And how many shades? Right now, this is going to be important later on. Right now, let's say X number of shades. Okay? Same thing with green. Green in its own channel or its own box has different shades of green. Again, let's say this number right now is X, and same with blue. Now, these other shades, or in the correct term for this is tonal variation. Okay, so whenever you hear the term tone, okay, or tonal, that we are saying it means brightness in the editing world. So tone means brightness, variation of the brightness of the color. So when you vary the brightness of a color, like you make red more bright or less bright, what's going to happen? That's going to result in shades, right? Different shades of red. So technical people like to use the term tonal variation, but if that confuses you, that just means different shades of red or whichever color that you are talking. So sometimes I'll just use these terms interchangeably, okay? So these are different shades or different tonal variations. And like I said, right now, we're not focusing on the exact number. We're just saying X. So P says, you know what? This is the yellow color that I want. Whatever you have in your box, is this enough? And RGB quickly analyze it and they say, yeah, you take certain shades of this, you take certain shades of from here, and you do this. And finally, P is happy because it gets this particular color. So that is how the pixel basically derives its color. Now, where the difference comes when it comes to bit depth is this crucial part where I just said X number of shades. Whenever you increase the bit depth, what you're basically doing is you're filling this box or this channel with more tonal variations or more shades. So when we say 8-bit has X number of shades, 16-bit per channel is going to have more than X. 32-bit will even have more shades here. Now, what is the advantage of having more shades? We'll also be soon looking at what this exact number is, okay? But what is the advantage of having more shades? Then what happens is that, let's say after they filled this, there was another pixel who came. Okay, sorry for the bad shape, bad drawing, but there was this P2 which arrived, the second pixel. And I said, even I want. But let's say now it was demanding a color, okay, which if we were working only with 8 bits, that means less number of available shades, somehow they were struggling to fill this pixel. Because red, green, and blue are literally telling this second pixel, you know what, we did the job for the first pixel, but we're kind of struggling to get this exact color. We simply don't have enough shades. It's literally like if you ask a painter who's come with a certain number of paints and you ask for a shade which is tough to create, right? A painter is going to get a bit nervous. So right now, RGB get a bit nervous. We don't have. So then what they do is they say, you know what, at 8 bits, we don't have this, but maybe at 16 or maybe at 32, since this is going to increase, we might be able to give you that exact color. So this exactly is happening right here. So if we go back to our first edit, think of it like this. These pixels were demanding shades which were simply not available because we were working at a lower bit depth. Here, if I just zoom out, things were much better simply because this was a 32-bit image, okay? And we simply had more tonal variations, more shades to fill each pixel's demand. Therefore, no pixel was unsatisfied. No pixel went unsatisfied except for some here. And the color change was seamless. Basically, the higher the bit depth, the easier it is to edit. Of course, there are a lot of different conditions attached, which can make some other things tough when you increase the bit depth. But we'll talk about that later. If you just understood why this happens at a higher bit depth and why certain things happen at a lower bit depth, that's more than enough for right now. Also, in the next video, let's actually also try to understand what the term bit exactly means so that we can figure out what is this exact number of tonal variations or shades that are available to us at different bit depths. So for that, I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now. All right, so let's try to now understand what the term bit exactly means, because this will just clarify a lot of things. So bit is just a short form for binary digit. So when we talk about computers, they're basically, they're dealing with binary language, and we just have these 2 binary digits from which the computer is making sense even when it comes to understanding or forming a color. So that pixel that we had, think of it like this. Remember, its job was to get filled by a certain type of color. So it's going to use a combination of 0 or 1. These are the binary digits or bits. So before we talk about things like 8-bit, 16-bit, or 20 or 32-bit, let's talk about a 1-bit image, okay? So what that means is, in a 1-bit image, what we're basically saying is that this pixel hardly has any choice. Why? Because it can only accommodate 1 binary digit or 1 bit. That's why it's going to form what will be a 1-bit image. So if it can only accommodate 1 binary digit or bit, then the choice is between 0 or 1. So let's say this pixel decides to have 0. Another pixel decides to have 1. But that's it. That is the choice that is there. And right now, just to kind of make things easy to understand, I don't want to go into too much technicality here. 0 in the color language, when it relates to this whole bit thing that we're trying to understand, 0 is basically black, okay? And 1 is basically white, okay? So if we go back to this particular image, let's see what happens if we turn this right now. I've just opened this image again. So this was just a JPEG image. So you can see here, it's RGB 8. That means it's on the 8 bits per channel mode. So let's turn this into a 1-bit image. Okay, now I'm going to do something. You don't have to worry about what I'm doing, because anyway, we don't use 1-bit images. But let's just turn it into this, okay? So I'll need to turn it into grayscale before. So don't worry what I'm doing here. But now, okay, if I select this option which says bitmap, it's going to basically turn this image into a 1-bit image. So let's see how this looks. Okay, don't again worry about this. but not too much of a difference from the black and white that we were seeing, but just see what happens when I zoom in. What you're going to find out is something amazing. If I really zoom into these pixels, can you see that each pixel now has only either the white pixel or the black pixel? So this can be considered 1, this can be considered 0. And can you see how amazing that is, that it's really forming this with just these two colors, okay? So 1-bit image is going to be just like this. And obviously, it's not very popular because, I mean, nobody wants to deal with such low quality. But of course, some people actually just find this effect very cool. So if you like that, you can follow what I did there, okay? But coming back to our drawing board here. So now let's talk about a 2-bit image. So the next level, right? We're going slightly higher because now is the time that you'll start to understand how things exactly work. Now in 1-bit, it could only accommodate one binary digit, right? But now let's again take a pixel. Now this time in a 2-bit image, it has certain possibilities. So remember I told you at the start that when we talk about bit depth, we're saying that it's how much of the combinations of the binary digits can it accommodate. Now here there was no combination possible because there was only one binary digit that it could accommodate. So there was nothing else, right? But now because it's 2, we can have different combinations of this, right? So maybe one can be, let's say this is a pixel. Now it can say 0, 0, right? The pixel can be 1, 1, 0, 1, 1, 0, and so on. But this will still not be a colored pixel because if you again take the concept of black and white, okay, in this case, right now, this is going to be again black, this is going to be white, and something like this, because we're only mixing black and white because it's only a two binary digit combination, it's only going to be like gray, right, basically. So again, color won't be possible here. So just in an easy way, think of it like this. We need more than 2 combinations here, okay? So now you'll start to understand that in an 8-bit image, what's going to happen is if we had this pixel, let me just draw something bigger. So the combinations will be like something like this, okay? So 0, 0, 0, 0, and so on, but 8 times. Then you can have 1, 1, 1, 1, 8 times. But just imagine the number of combinations that you can have here, because one can be 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1. Then you can have so many combinations like this. So what is the exact number of combinations? Remember I told you that time when we were talking about in the last video, I said right now just consider X as the number of tonal variations, right? So now you'll understand this number. So how many binary digits are there? 2, 0 and 1. And how many places can it be arranged at? 8 in an 8-bit image, right? So the total number of X in an 8 bits per channel image is 2 raised to 8 per channel. So that means, remember, we've drawn that diagram. R, G, B, your primary colors, each had their own box, which we said was the channel, right? And each of them now, the number of tonal variations that are possible thanks to these combinations is 2 raised to 8, 2 raised to 8, 2 raised to 8, which is 256, 256, because 2 raised to 8 is 256, 256. So what is the total number of colors that are possible in an 8-bit image? Well, because remember, it's not just 8-bit, right? It's 8 bits per channel like we had seen in Photoshop. So per channel 256 into 256 into 256, and the figure that you get is 16,77216. So roughly you can say around 16.7 or 16.8 million colors or tonal variations that are possible, because remember, it's per channel. So this is often just like a small mistake made by people. A lot of people, when they look at an 8-bit image, for example, they say that, that's how they say it, right? They don't say it per channel. So they say this is an 8-bit image. For example, JPEGs are converted to 8 bits, right? So they say JPEGs are 8-bit images. But let me actually show you by seeing the properties of a JPEG image, and you'll see something different. So remember, this was the image that we had opened up in Photoshop. If I right click and hit properties, if I go to details, and if I just show you the different properties here, can you see that under bit depth, it shows 24. So it doesn't say 8. Now you know the reason. So because if we go back to Photoshop, when we go to image mode, it is, remember, 8 bits per channel. So 8 plus 8 plus 8. Overall, it's a 24-bit image. But usually in the photography world, you'll just hear people say 8 bits, 16 bits, 32 bits, and that's usually accepted, but just thought I'll let you know. Now, let's also see one more example, which will be for the 16-bit image by going back to our drawing board. So in this case, the only change will be that instead of 2 raised to 8, now just imagine we'll have possibilities from combinations of these binary digits up to 16. Okay, so that means this is going to become 2 raised to 16. 2 raised to 16. And what is the number? 65536. Same here, same here. And you multiply to get the final number of tonal variations. And that number is going to be roughly 281. I can't even fill this, so I'm just going to write it in trillion. 281.47 trillion possible, variations, tonal variations. So just imagine these are the number. Even this is not less, right? 16.7 million is not less, but this, of course, takes it too high, right? So that's why you have more number of shades or tonal variations available, therefore making it's easier for them to fill the pixel. Therefore, mainly whenever there's a gradient, which requires a lot of different shades to make it smooth, a 16-bit image will be better than an 8-bit image. And since in this course, we'll be talking a lot about color changes, these gradients, when you shift one color to another, how smoothly does it lead to the change in color will depend on how many tonal variations are available to you. And that's why a higher bit depth will be much better. And there's no need to even go and talk about the 32-bit image. It's just going to be massively, massively high. Okay. Maybe you can take it as a homework and calculate it on your own. So I hope that enabled you to kind of get a better understanding of how bit depth works. But basically, even if you got lost here somewhere, okay, it's not that important as long as you just realize one thing. Okay, so let's discuss it this way. Which is the best bit depth to work with? Okay, now here's the thing. I won't straight away say go and start using 32 bits. We of course know that's going to be better, but the problem is, remember I told you in the last video, there are some other factors which you have to take in mind. Okay, now what happens is the moment you switch over, and sometimes you'll see this in this course, when you switch over to 32 bits, some of the filters and the adjustment functions, basically things that you get to edit in Photoshop, they become disabled. Okay, now right now we don't have to understand why they become disabled. Just think of it like this: there's too much load on Photoshop and it just disables certain things. So it's not like 32 is just it should be your default, because ideally it does sound like, because we have so many tonal variations, right? Usually the battle is between 8 and 16. We don't really use 32 too much. I had just done this in the last video because just to show you the extremes, like 8 and 32, okay? Usually 16 is a good sweet spot. But even there, you have to ask yourself, as you learn in this course, that is my edit, the edit that I'm going to do, is it too extreme? If I just want to maybe raise the brightness a bit, raise the shadows a bit and all, just very minor edits that we usually do to the images, you can absolutely do that to the 8-bit image also. So a lot of people, for most of the times, they will be working on 8-bit images. There's nothing wrong with that, okay? But the moment you know that you're going to be doing something extreme, you're going to be pushing these adjustment functions and the other things in Photoshop to their extremes, like we saw with the hue saturation adjustment function, then it's a good idea to switch over to 16. And since in this course, color changing is such a big topic, we will oftentimes be switching to a higher bit depth like 16, or even if required, in extreme cases, maybe even 32 if certain adjustment functions that we want to use are not disabled. Because the problem with 16 and 32 is they do lead to a slightly bigger file size, and there are some other issues, but usually switching between 8 and 16 is not a problem. So 8 for normal edits, 16 for extreme edits, is usually the correct approach. And don't forget one thing, bit depth is just one part of it. Remember, in the last video, we also saw that at the highest bit depth, we were still not able to get a perfect result because if you remember, this part of her dress was still had artifacts, right? It was kind of looking pixelated also. For that, so bit depth is just one concept. We'll also need to understand the concept of color theory, which is coming next in this course. But I hope that this particular video helped you understand the entire concept of bit depth. I'll see you in the next edit. Bye for now.